All right, we're going to get started. Thank you for joining today. My name is Nikki Kruger, and I am the Marketing Director and Business Development Director for Santa Fe Dehumidifiers. Today we're going to be talking about big opportunities in small spaces, which really is tackling the building science and business opportunity of encapsulating crawl spaces. All right. A little bit of background on Santa Fe. We are a brand of Thermostore. Thermostore is located in Madison, Wisconsin, and Santa Fe encompasses our residential basement and crawl space dehumidifiers, as well as our whole house ventilating dehumidifiers. Ultra Air used to be the brand for our ventilating dehumidifiers, and a couple years ago we combined that underneath Santa Fe. We were the first to come to market with the horizontal crawl space dehumidifiers back in the mid-90s. We also manufacture Quest, which is our ag dehumidifiers, and then Phoenix, which is our restoration equipment. So we manufacture the large dehumidifiers that are used typically in a water loss situation. Again, we are headquartered in Madison, Wisconsin, and that's where our factory is at. A little bit of background on me. I've been involved in the industry for 15 plus years. I'm a HERS rater, been members of several organizations to develop standards and protocols for HVAC, also spray foam, that sort of thing. We do have a 2-day crawl space encapsulation class that we developed with leading building science experts, as well as advanced energy out of North Carolina. And I'll get into that a little bit more at the end of the presentation as well. So just some basics before we dive in. Thermodynamics: hot goes to cold, wet goes to dry, and high goes to low. This is very important when we're looking at our building as a whole and making changes to it. So obviously in the summertime, we have all the pressures working against an air-conditioned home, with that hot air trying to get to cold, with that wet air trying to get to dry air, and then we have different pressures in the home that are going to affect it as well. As soon as a bath fan or a kitchen hood or the dryer goes on, we're going to be sucking into that home. And obviously a vented crawl space makes that even more accessible. So reverse stack effect is what we usually see during the spring, summer, fall in a home. So that's how those pressures are coming in. The home is always trying to equalize. So if we do have a fan that is exhausting, 1 CFM out means 1 CFM in. So we are trying to bring that air into the home when we're using those fans. So relative humidity is important to understand, because obviously that's what homeowners are hearing about, and that's oftentimes what we are using for a control strategy, something that is going by a RH base. So what's important to understand about relative humidity is it's relative to a temperature. So if a homeowner calls and says that I have 70% RH in my crawl space, without knowing what that temperature is, it really doesn't matter. So 50 degrees to 70 degrees is what we have illustrated here. The same amount of water is in the air, but when we lower the temperature, the RH is going to go up, and when we increase the temperature, the RH goes down. So again, and it's about we get a 2% relative humidity difference when the temperature increases. So when it's hot outside and the relative humidity is fairly low, when we bring that air into a cool crawl space, automatically the relative humidity is going to go up because we've cooled that air down. So dew point is really what we need to be thinking about in a crawl space. Dew point is basically the temperature at what the air is going to, what the air needs to be to start condensing on spaces, on materials. So water pipes, air ducts, cool CMU walls. That's typically where we're going to see the first signs of air condensing in crawl spaces. So this is a dew point map. Basically, if you are in an orange area on this map, you are going to need dehumidification at some time during the year. Spring, summer, fall, basement, attic, whole house, or crawl space, we're going to need a dehumidification strategy in these orange areas. Now, obviously, if you're down south, that time frame might last longer. If you're up north, it may be a shorter amount of time, but you are going to need some sort of dehumidification. This is a really great resource. It's on a website called dpcalc.org. That's dpcalc.org. And you can put in the temperature, the relative humidity, and it's going to give you a dew point there in green. What I really like about it is if you go to the right side and 3 lines down, it's going to give your potential to a mold risk time frame. So at these conditions, we are going to have the potential for mold growth in 2 days. And really, these conditions, spring, fall, can last for several days in these areas. So, and again, it could be warmer outside, but as soon as it enters that crawl space, it is going to become cooler air. And this is what it starts looking like on the ductwork in a crawl space. So the opportunity for crawl space encapsulation in the United States really is a very large opportunity. There are thousands of homes built every year on crawl spaces, and there's an estimated 76 million existing homes that have crawl spaces. So I'm not talking just new construction for the opportunity. The opportunity is to go in and to fix a lot of these homes that already have crawl spaces and most likely are having issues in those crawl spaces if they are vented. So there's a lot of green building programs and energy efficiency programs that are driving crawl spaces to be encapsulated. And the reason being for this is in a lot of markets, the HVAC system is located in that crawl space. And these building programs, even building code in some states, is driving for these mechanicals to be in a conditioned area, so the attic or the crawl space, because of the amount of inefficiency for the system, as well as energy efficiency standard programs. So, and according to various surveys, adding a high performance energy saving feature like crawl space encapsulation can offer an average of a 10% return on investment when a home is sold. So there is a lot of value to a homeowner for crawl space, for their crawl space to be encapsulated. We actually have heard from a lot of contractors that they're contacted by realtors for encapsulation in order to be able to sell that home. And it makes a lot of sense. If a home is smelling musty, that's going to be a huge turnoff to potential buyers. So this is the latest census information. This is through 2021. And the types of foundation in new single family homes completed. So as you can see, these numbers are in thousands. Crawl spaces in 2021, these are houses completed, 121,000 crawl spaces in the US. And what's interesting is we are seeing more homes built on slab, which still gives us an opportunity to go in then, because most likely that HVAC system is going to be located in an attic. So if we look at what we're doing in a crawl space in order to air seal it, condition it, control moisture, those same principles apply to an attic. So what we can take what we're learning in that business opportunity and the building science and the potential revenue that we can make and apply it to an attic situation as well. So this is a breakdown by region. Third one down there you can see is the South, where majority of vented crawl spaces homes are built is in the South. So that's where we see, and those are typically hot, humid climates. We see a lot also, surprisingly, in the West. And in the past, we haven't talked much about encapsulating crawl spaces in the West because the dew points are low. But if you are located in that area, what's interesting is building code in Washington is driving mechanicals to be in conditioned spaces. And so we're seeing encapsulated crawl spaces happening more and more out in the Northeast, as well as they typically didn't add air conditioning to homes in the Northeast, and that's changing as well. And as soon as you add air conditioning to a house, that changes all the dynamics of how that house is going to work. So interesting data. It really helps establish the business opportunity, especially in the South. So why encapsulate a crawl space? Air leakage increases energy consumption. So when you put vents in the side of a house, there's going to be air leakage, obviously, in that house. According to Advanced Energy, vented crawl spaces are 19 times more likely to experience relative humidity levels in excess of 70% than an encapsulated crawl space. It can lead to rot, cupped, buckled hardwood floors, damage to cabinetry. Obviously, pests, like when it's more of a humid climate. And then high humidity in crawl spaces can lead to microbial growth, structural issues, and poor indoor air quality in the living space. So the U.S. Department of Energy, through their Building America program, has done a lot of research as well, and especially when it comes to putting ductworks of the mechanical in conditioned spaces. So putting ducts in vented, unconditioned crawl spaces and attics makes almost no sense. These are quotes from their research from a building science standpoint. Building America research has provided proven solutions for locating ducts in conditioned space that are being adopted by builders across the country. Obviously, that conditioned space would be a encapsulated crawl space. So far too many homes are constructed with HVAC equipment and ductwork located in vented crawl spaces and attics. So their research is showing, and this is interesting because it's a hot, dry climate zone, that you can save 18 to 15% on air conditioning costs for homeowners. What I find interesting about that is, from our experience working in humid, hot climates, or even mixed humid climates, is a lot of times people will crank down their air conditioner, especially in overnight times, because they're uncomfortable, thinking that it's a temperature, but it's also actually a humidity issue, and they'll crank down that thermostat even more. So my guess is the savings would even be more in a mixed humid climate when we're talking about air conditioning costs, especially if that moisture is coming from the crawl space. And duct leakage in unconditioned spaces can cause a lot of callback and warranty issues for builders because of comfort, moisture, high energy bills. And indoor air quality is the top of a lot of homeowners' minds right now. So vented crawl spaces do not control moisture. Up to 50% of the air that's below the home makes its way into the living space. So bacteria, mold, insects, anything that related with allergies and asthma that's located below that home will make its way into the living space. Air rises, and then there's an indoor air quality problem. So why indoor air quality is important? I think, number one, indoor air quality is ranked among the top 5 environmental risks of public health by the Environmental Protection Agency. 6 out of 10 homes are hazardous to their occupants' health. 1 in 5 people have allergies and asthma. A lot of times when we're seeing dehumidifiers installed in homes, it's because potentially somebody has a health or a respiratory issue. Up to 50% of all illnesses can be attributed to indoor air quality, and 70 times more hazardous pollutants are found indoor than outdoor air. So there's a lot of studies out there, research studies on the importance to isolate the crawl space from the living space. And a lot of that is attributed to homes that are having some sort of pesticides applied below the home. And there's a lot of microtoxins and that sort of thing that are in that crawl space. So when we talk about encapsulating a crawl space, we are huge advocates of, even when it's encapsulated and it looks beautiful, that we try not to share as much air that's below the home with the living space still. And again, a lot of that is because of the pesticides that are still utilized in that crawl space. So encapsulation process, first of all, we gotta take care of bulk water, number one. If there is standing water in that crawl space, we need to figure out where it's coming from, and we've got to address that first. Then we're going to look at minimizing any air infiltration, because that's the number one way that water vapor makes its way into the crawl space. And so then we're going to address water vapor and then moisture management overall. So this is what my dream is of every encapsulated crawl space to look like. The challenge is that typically doesn't happen. What we usually see is when someone closes up a crawl space, this is what we're looking at here. We can do better, and we should be doing better, because obviously by looking at that CMU wall, we are not managing the moisture in this crawl space. So if we can get to here, we've got nice liner. Obviously, this isn't a southern encapsulated crawl space because we're not leaving that 3-inch inspection gap at the top for the termite inspection. But it is a nice looking crawl space. We've got good tape seams. We're going up the walls. We are applying our vapor barrier very well. And this is what we need to be looking at. So we've broken down in our 2-day encapsulation crawl space training class, our crawl spaces into categories. This helps us to be able to look at the crawl space and help define to the homeowner of potentially what that crawl space is going to need in order to get it to a level that is healthy. The house is going to be comfortable, and the house will be sustainable over a long period of time. So the purpose of this is really for that condition, help the homeowner understand, and also to know what services and the budget that they may need to get it to a certain level. So category one is where we want every crawl space to be. It's defined as no known and significant health risks. The air sealing is good. Insulation meets or exceeds the energy code. Walls and ground are covered with a vapor barrier. The humidity is going to be conditioned to less than 60% year-round. And bulk water is fully managed by drainage or pumping if there was a bulk water issue. Category 2, we have no known and significant health concerns. And one or more of the following is not true. So it's not properly air sealed, the insulation's not in good repair or doesn't meet code, the walls and ground are not covered properly with a vapor barrier, we're not controlling humidity, and obviously there could be a bulk water issue. So it's a category 2 if one or more of those following is not true. Category 3 is basically what you're going to walk into most vented crawl spaces. A known and significant health concern exists. If that is the case, typically we recommend that you do not proceed until those are addressed, because we want to make sure that anybody who's working in that crawl space is safe with no potential health issues. And then one of the following, again, is not true. That's the air sealing, the insulation, the vapor barrier, humidity is not being controlled, or there's a bulk water issue. If it's a category 3, it should not be encapsulated, and thus the health risks are mitigated first. So if you see microbial growth and you are not trained to be able to remediate that, then you need to be working with someone to make sure that's addressed before you proceed. So, if there's bulk water and you are not comfortable or trained to be able to deal with whatever resolution may be needed to mitigate that, then that needs to be done before you proceed. So we want to make sure that we've got good partners in the industry that we can work with when we run into these, so we can help that homeowner and proceed with the encapsulation. So what to look for? Obviously, musty odors is a big one. If you look at a lot of times how homeowners finally go down the pathway of purchasing a residential commercial grade dehumidifier, it's musty odors is a lot of time of what they'll start talking about what's going on in their home. There's high RH in the crawl space. Obviously, we want to be monitoring, metering to know what that RH is. If you walk in and they have a low set point on that thermostat, it's probably not a temperature issue. It's they're uncomfortable in their living space because of a humidity issue. Condensation on ductwork in the crawl space, obviously that's going to be a giveaway that we've got an issue. Microbial growth. If you're seeing portable dehumidifiers in the crawl space, or even in the living space, because again, a lot of moisture can be coming into that living space, and they're using a portable dehumidifier, that's a sure sign that there's an issue. Air cleaners as well. That probably means somebody in the house has a respiratory issue and they're using a portable air cleaner. And if we've got a vented crawl space below, we could be amplifying their respiratory issues due to the conditions that are created down there. And then cupping of wood floors. Meters typically needed is a thermal hygrometer. This is going to show us what the temperature differences are in the relative humidity in that crawl space. So we want to collect data. We want to be able to communicate to the homeowners what's going on in their crawl space before, and because data doesn't lie. You can't argue with data when you start showing these kind of numbers. And then also we want to be able to show them after the encapsulation how we've improved their homes. And then moisture meters. We need to know what the wood moisture content is of the wood in that space to understand potentially, how degraded potentially that wood is and where we need to get it back to. So moisture management. High humidity, damage to home and assets. We know that health-related issue, mold problems, pest problems. Wood rot blistering paint is at 85% RH or higher. So a lot of times when we see that, it would be if you're looking at the trim on the baseboard around, or your baseboards on the first level, the paint right above that, you'll start seeing a lot of blistering of the paint along that area because of the high humidity in the crawl space. Cupping of wood floors, stains on walls and ceilings, 75%, which is very typical to see these kind of numbers in a vent and crawl space. And then obviously mold and mildew growth is 60%. So mold needs 3 things to grow: organic food source, elevated moistures, and temperatures 59 to 86 degrees. Crawl spaces provide ideal conditions for all of those things. Stop mold. And we need to control the moisture. That wood moisture content should be less than 16%, and the relative humidity should be below 60%. So our high humidity control strategies, we have 3 options. We have ventilation, so we can try to control that moisture in the crawl space using a ventilation strategy. The HVAC system, putting some air-conditioned air into that space after we have closed it up, and then obviously dehumidification. And we're going to dive into all these a little bit more according to building code, what our conditioning strategies can be. So the 2021 IRC encapsulation energy code gives us some options here on how we conditioned that unvented crawl space. So we have to do one of these once we encapsulate that crawl space. Continuously operated mechanical ventilation at a rate equal to 1 cubic foot per minute for each 50 square feet. What's important here with 2.1 and 2.2 is that you have to have a air pathway to the common area once you do one of these. So you're going to need a duct or a transfer grill. So that means if you're exhausting out of that crawl space, the humid air, you're going to have a makeup path for the air in the living space. Because again, 1 CFM out is 1 CFM in. And I've got an illustration of all these. The most common one that I see is the conditioned air supply delivered to the crawl space. So you know the ductwork's down there. You put in a supply register in the ductwork to deliver the 50 or the 1 cubic foot per minute of 50 square per 50 square feet of conditioned air into that space. Again, you got to have a makeup grill in that space, and we have an illustration of that. This one, 2.3, we should not be using in existing structures whatsoever, and I'm not even going to go into this one, but it's using basically your floor joist as a plenum, and never works out well. Don't ever do it. And then for 2021, the update to the dehumidifier specifications are a dehumidifier sized in accordance with manufacturer specifications. I worked on this code with Joe Steenbrook, and we thought it might be too simple because code, as you can see by 2.1 and 2.2, typically don't like to word things simply, but that's what we came to. What's important to understand is there is no governing body guidance on dehumidification sizing. So if I say that our dehumidifier is 1,800 square feet for a 75 or a 70 pint dehumidifier, then my competitor can say, well, our 70 pint dehumidifier does 3,000 square feet. So it's really important to understand why that sizing is important and how you're getting there. We are very conservative in our recommendations for sizing our dehumidifiers because it's hard to oversize but easy to undersize. And you don't want to be selling a package to solve somebody's moisture issues and undersize a dehumidifier. So very important to understand that. Now, this was the 2018 code that I also worked on. Unfortunately, we did it very last minute and we didn't quite get it right. That's why we updated it for 2021. But this was 70 pints per 1,000 square feet. So that meant if the crawl space was over 1,000 square feet, you had to have 2 dehumidifiers. That was overkill and has been changed. Now, if you live in a state that is on 2018 or on 2012 or 15, the latest code always trumps the prior code. So they can't penalize you for using 2021 code. So if you live in a state that dehumidifiers aren't even in the code, which was before 2018, unless you live in North Carolina, you now, in that inspector for some reason says, oh, that's not part of our code, you can't do that. 2021 will always trump the last one. So you don't need an engineer stamp any longer like it used to be in order to use a dehumidifier to condition this crawl space, which really is probably what you need more than anything because it's the only thing that's going to control the relative humidity to a specific set point. So continuously operated mechanical exhaust ventilation. The pro, the equipment is pretty inexpensive. The cons is it can increase the humidity in the entire home. And why is that? As soon as we're exhausting out the lower level, we're sucking in from the upper level. So if it's hot and humid outside, and we're now bringing that air, sucking it into our attic, which if it's a vented attic could be just as bad as our previously vented crawl space, and sucking that all down into the home, plus that pathway, you never know where you're going to hit dew point and can create condensation, right? So if we're exhausting down here in the crawl space and pulling through the attic, we could be creating some surfaces for condensation. Not good for indoor air quality. There's no set point for the relative humidity in that crawl space. And again, could cause comfort issues throughout the entire home. Excuse me. And that's what this would look like. Again, we got to have that floor grill per code. We got to have that floor grill. So that's conditioned air from the attic. And then we're going to be exhausting out. I don't see this one very often, especially in mixed humid and humid climates, but it does meet code. Conditioned air in supply in the crawl space. See this one quite often. Why? No equipment needed basically than what's already in the crawl space. The cons is that this only dilutes the moisture. It is not drying that space. And it potentially can push moisture from the crawl space back into the living space. It can create condensation a lot. Even when this strategy is used, I do see condensation still being developed in that crawl space. And you're only conditioning that air in the crawl space when the homeowner is running their air conditioning because of a comfort issue in the living space, right? That's what our thermostat does. We control our thermostat based on our comfort in our living space. The challenge is the spring and fall are typically when dew points are highest and when most of our rainy season is. And there's not typically a lot of air conditioning. 70 and raining, most likely they're not running their air conditioning. And those conditions, those outside conditions can last for long periods, depending on where you're located. So, and again, no way to set the relative humidity. And remember that when we put air, when we cool air, the RH goes up. So when we're putting cold supply air from our air conditioner into a crawl space that's already cool, that relative humidity is going to be driven up. And that's what that would look like right there. That's a supply register and a ductwork in a crawl space. Here's an illustration of that. Now again, we got to have that floor grill that's connecting to the conditioned space. So we're sharing that air from our crawl space with the rest of the house. This is a case study that we did in the Mid-Atlantic in Northern Virginia. We had two habitat houses located right next to each other, and we encapsulated them. And one we used the AC supply to condition the space, and the other one we used a dehumidifier. On the right side there, where you see AC supply, the solid orange line there is the relative humidity outside. And the blue solid line is the dew point. So we've got rainy days here. We've got dew points that are in the 70s. And our goal is to have a dew point more like 55 in the space. Now the dotted line is what was going on in that crawl space. So the orange line there is the RH in that crawl space. And as you can see, it's consistently above 60%. And this was in April. And I had the alarm set up for when the RH got high on my phone and had to shut it off because it was April through the summer into the fall. We finally went in and replaced it with a dehumidifier because we just couldn't get that crawl space to dry out. And these were new construction. And on the left-hand side, you can see we've got that dehumidifier set a little low. They had done some remediation in there before we closed up the crawl space, and the dehumidifier was set a little too aggressively. We went in and changed that, but as you can see, we don't care what the RH is outside or what the dew point is outside, or if there's any AC runtime going on, we're going to control that relative humidity to a set point in that space. So both these options, little to no equipment cost, do not manage humidity year round, and then allows communication with the living space. So dehumidifier, as we said, It's set is the only way to control to 60% year round. That's the pro, less than 60%. It decreases the humidity potentially in the living space as well, because if we control what's going on below, then that hopefully isn't going into the living space. It's the only way to remove moisture and not dilute it, but actually remove it. The con is, yes, there's going to be equipment and operation costs, and it's going to have to be maintained. But long term, it's the only way to really control that space, protect the health, the home, and the comfort of the people in it. So again, the key is removal, not dilution. We want to set that dehumidifier to run at about 55%. It keeps the outlying areas from exceeding 60. So dehumidifiers, their humidistat is located in the front of that dehumidifier, and that's where it's reading the RH. So if we keep it at 55 in that area, then we'll be more successful as keeping the outer corners and area below 60. Even more so with our ducting recommendation, which we'll go to. There's really no benefit of setting the dehumidifier below 50% if you want to set it a little lower. It's only going to increase the operation costs. So no real benefit there. So we're going to dry that air with the dehumidifier. They're very energy efficient. They're rated in liters per kilowatt. Low temperature operation. So when you buy a residential commercial grade dehumidifier, one of the benefits that you get is, especially since we manufacture restoration equipment, which is the technology and the components that are used in our residential units, is we get low temperature operations. So when that dehumidifier is put into a cooler area like a crawl space, we are still removing quite a bit of water very energy efficiently, versus if you go to Home Depot, someplace like that, and buy a portable and put it in there. Those tend to lose a lot of their capacity and efficiency at lower temperatures. Plus, we have MERV 13 filters in all of our dehumidifiers. So again, we're collecting contaminants in that air before that air makes it up into the living space. So sizing dehumidifiers. There are three main factors to consider when looking at what size of dehumidifier to use. How much humidity is in the space, the size of the space, and the temperature inside the space as well. So here is our lineup here and what we recommend for sizing. So most average crawl spaces, I would always recommend using our Santa Fe Advanced 90. And the reason being for that is you've got the dual exhaust on both sides. So our Advanced 90 now comes with those ducts included with it. You don't have to use the one on the front of the dehumidifier, but I highly recommend that you use the two on the side and attach flex duct to that unit and get that dried air moving throughout the crawl space. Air distribution is very important. We're going to go into that a little bit more. But you can also use our newest unit, the Oasis 105, for most average crawl spaces. If it is a very large crawl space, we do have the Impact 155. I see that one typically in very large crawl spaces, very large homes, and then also commercial buildings where they have crawl spaces below. That one is used. Our most energy efficient is the new Oasis 105, extremely energy efficient. If you want more information on that, we've got a video on our website, on that units page on the website that goes into more detail. Small crawl spaces, Santa Fe Compact 70, and also what dictates a lot of the size of the dehumidifier is going to be the crawl space opening, that door, and what size you can get in there. And that probably drives even more sales of our Compact 70 is because it can fit through most crawl space doors. So Dehumidifier air movement, using that flex duct on the dehumidifiers, no matter what size you are using on the exhaust side, is extremely important. It dramatically reduces the dehumidifier from short cycling and also prevents any zones that might still have high relative humidity. So, we're reading the RH in front of that dehumidifier, and then we have warm, dry air coming out. That ducting allows us to get that dried air away from the front of that front of the dehumidifier where the sensor is located, and then we don't create kind of a microclimate right around that dehumidifier. Also, what the ducting allows is, we like to have a dehumidifier centrally located in the crawl space, but the reality is getting electrical to the dehumidifier there and then also draining it might not be an easy option when you're centrally located. So oftentimes we'll see dehumidifiers sitting more towards the crawl space door, which is good because I think that also helps it be a little easier to maintain, change that filter, check that condensate line. And so if we're locating it more towards the door, getting that duct work on the dehumidifier and running it so it's farther to the farther corners really helps with that air movement as well. And if you have some oddly shaped crawl spaces, you can run one of the ducts more over into more of an isolated area as well, and maybe not having to purchase another dehumidifier for that space. So this is the Compact 70, and this is what that looks like with having that exhaust or supply duct on it and just running it to another area of that crawl space and getting good air movement. So again, big box units, not ideal for crawl spaces. If you do go into a crawl space and you see one of these, please make sure that you recommend to the homeowner that they check on the Consumer Product Safety website. There has been a massive recall the last several years on millions of portable dehumidifiers because they are starting on fire. If you go on YouTube and put in dehumidifier fire, you will see people running out of their homes with these smoking portable dehumidifiers that explode. So it is extremely important that if you do see one of these, that someone's checking to make sure it's not on the recall list. So the homeowner benefits and what you can sell to the homeowner: better indoor air quality in their living space, which we know is a hot topic for homeowners, especially if there's respiratory and asthma concerns as well. But it also protects the house, which, that's their largest asset typically. And whether that's a rental home or they own the home, protecting that crawl space, it's the foundation of the home and it has to be maintained and protected. Greater comfort, definitely fewer pest and critter problems, and an improved relationship. You can set up a maintenance contract with your homeowner to go in, check that crawl space, make sure that another contractor who's worked in that crawl space hasn't compromised the encapsulation, change the filter on the dehumidifier, check that condensate line. And we've seen a lot of contractors who've added encapsulation into their offering, being able to kind of even out the ebbs and flows of maybe their other services. So if you're an HVAC, or maybe your focus is waterproofing or pests, that there's times of the year where maybe you're not as busy. So one thing you can do when you are quoting a homeowner is, when you provide them that proposal, say, okay, this is the price if we're here in the next week or two to encapsulate this crawl space. But if you give us the next 30 days, we can offer you this quote unquote discount to come back and be able to do it. You're not going into their home. All you need is access to that crawl space, and that allows you to be able, you know, work in that service by still being able to provide the other service you do. Just maybe you're a little bit slower, so keep your crews going. We often get asked about the cost of using a dehumidifier. There is a website called redcalc.com, redcalc.com. I think that's it, but it's Residential Energy Dynamics. And they have a ventilation electrical usage calculator, which I use for our dehumidifiers. So our Compact 70 is 580 watts. I put in here that that dehumidifier is going to run 210 days of the year and 20 minutes of every hour in the day. Obviously, there would be times where it runs more. There'll be times when it runs less. The kilowatt cost is 13 cents per kilowatt. So to run that dehumidifier for 210 days of the year, 20 minutes of every hour is $126. So very energy efficient to be able to control that moisture in the home and protect their health, comfort, and their home. So again, we have a 2-day building science crawl space encapsulation class. If you're familiar with Joe Steenbrook from Building Science Corp, Allison Bales from Energy Vanguard. We also teamed up with Paul Hardy from the Pest Association, Chris Conway from a building science expert in multifamily to develop this 2-day course. It is based on building science, and then from the standpoint of how to apply it, we teamed up with Advanced Energy for a how-to guide. So we are now offering it. Our next class is June 13th to 14th, I think. If you're interested, shoot me an email and I can get you the information. It's in Madison, Wisconsin, and then real close to our factory is where we hold this class, because we do have a crawl space mock-up to actually go in and encapsulate a crawl space. And then we also take a tour of our factory at that time as well. So again, this is not a class on dehumidifiers or a Santa Fe marketing class. This is all about the building science, because you can do more harm not correctly encapsulating a crawl space than if you were just to leave it vented. So getting it right is extremely important. Plus, this knowledge will help differentiate you from your competitors on the market as well. So we have more resources. We do have an app, Santa Fe Indoor Air Quality Solutions, with all of our manuals, spec sheets, install recommendations. There's product videos on there as well. So if you look in your app store, that's Santa Fe Indoor Air Quality Solutions. And we do have a contractor portal as well. So if you are a contractor that is installing Santa Fe products and you would like to be included on our website, we have a dealer locator. You can sign up on the contractor portal for that. And then in the contractor portal, we do have some additional resources, which we will be adding to here shortly. We have a lot of resources being developed with videos and tools that we will be putting in that contractor portal that will be available to you. And then we have 2 locations on our website for logos and literature. You can go underneath the About section and it says Media Resources, and all that's listed. Also, which makes sense as well, if you go on that top tab next to About, there's a Resources section that also will get you to this page, which again has our spec sheets, manuals, case studies. We have a lot of case studies on there as well. So where to buy, this is that dealer, that pro locator. So if you're interested in being listed on there, you can sign up underneath the contractor portal to be added to the pro locator. And that is all I have for you today. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Thank you. I'm glad everybody responded about being able to hear from me. All right. I appreciate you reaching out, and please let me know if you have any questions or if you need to be connected with a Santa Fe sales rep in your area. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day.